So to briefly overview what we're going to cover today, now it's not moving again. We're going to obviously talk a little bit more about the fair. Again, if you haven't received much information, we'll talk more about that. Then we'll go into more detail about what it takes to show up to the fair, how to prepare yourself, really before you get there. And we'll talk about like the engaging, connecting piece of being at the fair and kind of what you can expect in terms of planning to prepare for that kind of engagement. And then we'll talk about following up, what to do after the fair with the information that you've gathered from the new employers that you've met and the new connections that you've hopefully made. So to talk about the fair, like I mentioned before, the ice cream truck is first come, first serve. It is on Tuesday, September 16th, which is next week, from 3 to 6 p.m. So if you're in class earlier, feel free to come later and vice versa, so on and so forth. We also wanted to make a note that this year in the cow chair room, we will have a LinkedIn photo booth where students can pause to regather their thoughts because it'll be a quieter space than the rest of the fair, but also take a headshot if you would like a new headshot for your LinkedIn profile. This is a perfect time to get one. Um, and then we have reserved room 210 in Tishman as a quiet space that students can go and speak with employers. So if you are interested in talking to employers on a more one-on-one basis, that's where you can go and take them with you. Sit. Thank you. Sorry, she was crying. Um, so showing up for the fair, what does it really take to prepare before you get there? What should you be thinking about this weekend as you're preparing? So first things first, you should do your research. We are going to have QR codes at the end with talk about the fair, have links to the fair in Handshake. And it'll have information there about all of the companies that are registered. And I definitely think that going through those companies and maybe even looking at those companies' job boards or searching those companies' names on LinkedIn, etc., would be a fantastic place to start. Um, it'll also be helpful to come up with a short list of companies that you would like to meet, and think about what things interest you about this company. That way you get an idea of what you're going to talk about. So take a look at their opportunities, but also maybe check out the company website and learn about their culture, see if there are any internship or other kinds of learning opportunities that they offer through their organization as well. So come up with some thoughtful questions is also super helpful. So you just have kind of an idea of what you were going in to talk with them, what you would actually like to talk about. Um, we also should prepare your resume. It says cover letter. I actually should have deleted that. You really only need to bring a resume to the fair. However, if you are planning on applying for a posted job at that company, career education can, I guess, also help you make a cover letter for that application. And perhaps it could be a way to connect with the recruiter by saying, "Oh, I'm working on my application for this company." Um, but definitely you want to bring plenty of copies of your resume in paper form. Um, we're going to skip the cover letter part again. I wouldn't say to bring that, but consider bringing a folder or a portfolio, like a padfolio, if you have one, to carry your resume copies without having them get dented or covered in schmutz or whatever. And then the last thing you also want to try to do is practice your professional pitch, or we also call it an elevator pitch. The goal of your elevator pitch is to, in the span of an elevator ride, so 30 seconds to a minute, decide how you want to present yourself to employers. So perhaps you start by saying, "Hi, I'm Alexis. I use she, her pronouns. I work in career education, but have a background in animal science research and a bachelor's and master's degree in animal science." That would be maybe my little elevator pitch about myself. But then, if I were specifically talking to one of these companies, having done my research, I would say, "Oh, I was actually interested in stopping by this booth because I know that your organization does blank, blah, blah, blah." That could just be a fantastic way to get the conversation going because these recruiters are here to talk to you, but it's really it appears very confident when you come up knowing what you want to say. Anything you wanted to add to this, Hilda?
No, you got it.
Amazing. So the dress code for the fair is business professional attire. We do have business attire that is available for you to borrow in career ed. So if any of you are looking to borrow a blazer to throw on after you leave class, or if you're looking to borrow a pair of dress pants, we have a whole range of sizes available for free for all students. And we also do the dry cleaning for students as well too. So there's literally no cost. You wear the suit, you bring it back to us, we'll have it dry cleaned and prepared for the next student. But if you are looking to get your like a suit, I would say definitely come by early because obviously many students are going to the fair. And it can be super helpful to, you know, get that, get yourself comfortable also in the outfit that you're going to wear before you wear it. So I would say try it on too if you can. We will also have some blazers available at the fair. If you, again, you aren't able to change fully for some reason, but want a blazer to throw on, we'll have the clothes rack of what we have left with us as well too for students to borrow. But it is important to dress to impress. Cleanliness matters, as well as it matters to not, try to wear the new shirt that is a little bit tighter on the collar, or to wear the skirt that kind of rides up when you walk, or to do something that you think is uncomfortable for the sake of fashion. Now is the time. You're already going to be so stressed out about talking to employers. Now is not the time to also be stressed out about the way that your outfit looks or the way that it feels on your body. So try to be conscious about wearing clothes that are too tight, too loose, and be mindful about wearing shoes. It might not be the time to break out the new leather loafers that you have, or to get the 6-inch heels out, because maybe you won't be the most comfortable standing in that for a half an hour, however long you're at the fair. You may want to express yourself with signature pieces. We absolutely encourage that, because business professional means different things for different industries. But be mindful of what your industry may be looking for, what professionals in your industry wear. That also is something that could be a part of your research component before you go to the fair. And if you have a bag, we will have spaces where you can drop your book bag. But if you wanted to bring a smaller bag around with you, feel free to bring water, mints, pen or pencil if you want to jot notes, or if you get a business card from somebody and want to write things on the back of it. Or chapstick. But we highly encourage that as you are walking up to talk to employers, that you are putting your phone away. So it's okay to use your phone for notes after you walk away from the conversation or in between conversations with employers, but I would say to generally not have it out while you're speaking to them if you can. We wanted to put together some examples of what professional attire can look like. We included Ellen for the pure purpose of the fact that she's wearing sneakers, which can be dressed up nicely and tastefully, but they're very clean sneakers. They match the outfit. So just be mindful about that. But you can be very comfortable while also looking very business professional. Again, if you do feel very comfortable in heels, just be mindful of which ones that you're wearing. Wear them in multiple times before you do. But there are lots of ideas of what professional business attire can look like, and it's not always dresses and skirts. But here are some examples of some nice dresses or skirts that could also be considered business attire. And if you need more ideas, feel free to always reach out to us as well too. And at this point, I'll pass it over to Hilda to take over on what it will look like when you are actually at the fair.
Yeah, so on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about how to make the most of your opportunity in front of these employers. So things that we thought you would sort of to talk about and make sure that you take with you and you keep in mind, just to be present. Let's start there. You're coming in, you might need to take a moment before you fully walk in, or maybe you want to like scope out and see how everything's laid out before you sort of present yourself, but just come in, take it all in. You've done your homework, as Alexis said, to think about the companies that you're interested in. So looking at the map and figuring out where they are, and then embracing that with yourself, sort of being very present. The other thing we did last year and we're doing this year too is to have a QR code at each employer. So as you approach the employer's table, you'll see a QR code to check in with them. Once that's done, you can put away your phone and once again re-engage in sort of that present mindfulness of it all. Then we were talking about, what do you do next? And the next is make the first move. Sometimes there'll be a whole bunch of people or sometimes no one's there. And so either way, when there's a moment, you can introduce yourself, make eye contact, make sure you're confident in your message as well as sort of demeanor. So like you can be like, hi, how are you? My name is so-and-so, and you can do your little introduction or your elevator pitch. Depends on like, if there's a lot of people there, maybe you have to wait a second. And if there's no one there, then you have them all to yourself, which is amazing. But either way, just being able to go in there and be yourself. So introducing yourself, the elevator pitch, be curious, ask questions. You probably did your homework and thought about a whole bunch of questions. Some you might be able to hear from others who are asking around you. And then others, you might just be burning to know something in particular or unique about that company. So go ahead and just ask those questions. I think many times from a recruiter end, those come off as showing your interest in that you've done your homework. And then finally, at the end, depending on how the conversation's going, there might be an opportunity to ask for a business card. And again, depending on the flow of the conversation, leave your resume with them and show interest in that way. I think in the next slide, we'll talk about what you can do with that business card. So Alexis had mentioned to bring a pen or a pencil. I think that's actually key. It seems kind of wonky to carry it, but maybe you can put it like inside the folder if you don't have a purse or something or a pocket. But I do think that it's great to have a pen or a pencil. And when you get that business card on the back side, just jot down things, that you remember in that moment about the conversation. Because in this slide, we're talking about what do you do afterwards, right? Okay, so one of the things we do is we send a follow-up email. And in that email, sometimes we say, well, what should we say? So you can follow up not only on the conversation you had and mention maybe some details that make sense to include from your conversation so they remember you, but then also you can ask follow-up questions. So that little business card can really help you out in the end because you can take those notes back there. And then finally, if you really are interested in that employer, go ahead and ask the question around, are there opportunities that you could be applying for? Another thing we do once the career fair is over, we go to our dorms, we think through like everything that just happened, and we're like, okay, let's do a little reflection. Like, what did I do that I really was proud of, and I had, that went really well? And then what are the other things that I could probably do better next time? Or like, oh, isn't that silly that that happened? And just kind of, catalog the things that you noticed about your experience. And then what else did you learn? Sometimes you might have learned that you're really great, good at doing those elevator pitches. Or maybe you learned something about a company that you had no idea about, and now you're kind of curious about them. Or you learn, that a recruiter from a company made it super interesting and welcoming, and now you're going to be applying to them. So it kind of opens up the world by seeing it through those different thoughts. But yeah, I think reflection is kind of key. And then the third piece was come visit us. Let us help you. Career Ed, both the peer career mentors, which are obviously peers, can help you with like small questions and resume and looking at those kind of things. You could come and make an appointment, and we can do a one-on-one, whether, Alexis, myself, Christopher, whichever industry advisor is there. Or if you are taking a step back and thinking like, I actually don't know what industry I want to continue to pursue, then also, you can engage with the ACEs. And then finally, yeah, keep a pulse on the handshake events and newsletter. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, there is a way to do it from your profile, where the little initials are on the top right corner of Handshake, if you want to do that. And that kind of helps you stay on top of things. And then as far as events go, yeah, definitely sign up if you think you can make it to an event. And some of the events, I should say, some of the employers that are at the fair are also doing events on campus, whether it's an info session or a workshop or a coffee chat. And I think that's always really nice. If you are interested in that employer, go to the follow-on events, because they're going to see a whole bunch of people at the fair, and just being able to see you again will help solidify your own personal brand. Okay, so next slide.
Just another shameless plug too, that, some employers also that aren't able to make it to the fair will be at some events that we're hosting this semester. So check out the handshake event section. I can't encourage that enough. And also some of the follow-up questions that you may have for career education, we may be running a session about the week after. So would definitely recommend digging into that too.
So we're going to open up for questions. But as you guys are thinking of them and maybe unmuting yourself or typing it in, we wanted to highlight a couple of other fairs that are happening that, depending on your schedule or your interests, you should really attend and go for it. So the one on the far top left is obviously our fair, the one that's coming up on campus next week. The one to the underneath that is the Olin Career Fair, a little more tech, a little more engineering-like, but definitely another one to check out if that is what you're looking for. And you can look at the employers that are going on Handshake. So that QR code will take you to that fair. The top right one is the women's universities and colleges career fair. It's virtual. It's a bunch of schools, and it means that there's a lot of employers. Some that couldn't sadly be with us next week are attending that virtual one, so we're really excited about that. Of all the QR codes here, I would say the top right one is the one that I would make sure you grab it while you're on the call, because I think that fair is a little harder to like populate on Handshake for students, because the school that's hosting it is, we're not the school, and so it doesn't always come up in the way that we expect it to. And then the bottom one is a career fair at Babson. It's a couple days after ours. It's nice and big and lots of different opportunities and employers that are going to that one. Okay, so on that note, do you guys have any questions?
And if you're more shy, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Yeah.
I am keeping an eye on it too. There's also no such thing as a dumb question.
No, because if you have it, I'm sure somebody else has it. Here's a question. Okay.
Amazing. Someone asked, can we go to just ask questions and not hand out resumes or anything? Um, Really good question. You absolutely can. I would just say that, given that you're going and engaging with employers, uh, you're getting to know more about them. It's only fair to kind of give them a little bit of background about you. But if you haven't developed a resume yet, I understand that you're maybe afraid of like bringing something about yourself. You can always reach out to career education for some help. I know that we're pretty booked up in our one-on-one appointment slots, but there may be some drop-ins. For example, there's first year drop-ins tomorrow. If you again go back to that event section on Handshake, you should find that. But that's a good question. There was also a question about shoes, and for sanitary reasons, no, we do not have shoes available for rent, unfortunately.
That is a good question.
I also got a DM from a student saying our first year is encouraged to attend the fair since we don't have much experience yet. I
Yeah.
wanted to leave this one for you, Hilda, because
Yeah.
I don't want to run the combo.
Actually, so I will tell you, I spoke to a lot of first years yesterday, and for some, it's their first time. And so I totally encourage you to go. Part of it is eventually you're going to have to, get a job and you're going to go to a fair. And so it's really nice for you to have that exposure. And every year we learn a little bit more. And so I do encourage you to come, listen, try to absorb the environment, listen to the conversations, see the dynamic between people. How do people interact? And can start the process of sort of understanding what a career fair looks like. Are there first year opportunities? If you look in the fair page, the event page, it will tell you the companies, and then within it, they will tell you they have jobs, and it'll say if it's for a first year or not. There was another question. Is this a good fair for freshmen to begin to network? I hope that answered a little bit. It says STEM, but I think it's good across the board.
Yeah, that is a very popular question about if it's helpful for first years across the board. And I
Yeah.
would say absolutely talk to employers. Still feel free to bring a copy of your resume. Even if they don't have opportunities available for first years, how lovely would it be to establish a strong connection with a recruiter this year and have a leg up when you're applying for things next year? Especially if you can get a direct email address or contact info for a recruiter or for some alums that might be in attendance at the fair, that would be very helpful.
I always say this too. There is a saying in marketing, which used to be my background, that you have to have six impressions before a brand sticks in somebody's mind. And so I say first years go out there and start to make, build those impressions with a firm. Eventually, they will get to know you.
I have another direct message about is it worth missing a class for the fair? And I think that that is a good question, but also is going to be a very independently dependent question.
Agreed.
Because, obviously classes do still matter. If you have class that is covering the full span of the career fair, there are other ways to engage, and obviously there are other fair opportunities that you're also welcome to attend.
Yeah.
So I would take that into consideration. I would say do your research on what companies are in attendance. If there's a company that you're like, oh my God, I really, really would love to work there, and I would be so remiss to not have connected with them, it is very challenging to connect with these companies sometimes outside of the fair. So I would say then maybe it could be worth it, but you'd have to weigh that pros and cons of the cost versus benefit. But there are also other career fair opportunities if not available there. If you're not available that day.
Yes. And that's part of the nice thing that some of them come on campus and do follow-on events because you can say when you go to the event, I'm really sorry I wasn't able to go to the career fair, but I'm here now. And you can ask your questions then. There was a question that said, will there be internship available too? Yes, it's both internship and also full-time jobs.
Someone also asked if we have an iron for your own clothes, which we
Ooh,
don't have available, unfortunately.
I feel like that was always hard to come by in college.
Yeah,
You could put it in the like in the bathroom when you're taking a shower. Maybe it'll like,
steam out
yeah.
a little bit. We unfortunately
Okay.
only dry clean the clothes that we keep in our office.
Yeah. All right, there's one more question. Where can we find a list of recruiters that are going to attend the fair? I actually don't think that they pop up. I think it's a company and the jobs that pop up. And there is somebody raised their hand too.
Um, Sorry, wait, hold on. Before we go to Hannah's question, we'll come to you really quickly, Hannah. Someone else in the chat mentioned that there is an iron at the nap center. So
Ooh.
that's helpful for whoever mentioned the iron. I also had one more DM'd question about like what would be good questions to ask employers. And I'm gonna put we have a networking resource page on the Career Ed website. I'm gonna drop the link to that in the chat in a second. I'm still sharing my screen. Or actually, Hilda, if you could drop that in the chat, that would be super helpful. Uh, so that way that has a whole list of career related questions that you might ask during what we would consider an informational interview, which does not always lead to a job. The whole goal of an informational interview is just to gather information about what a day in the life of these different jobs look like, what kinds of opportunities that they have available. I would say that really it's going to be based off of the research that you do about that company, that and what jobs and opportunities that you might be able to find at that company. That will probably shape the center of your questions, but that networking resource might be helpful too. I'm going to go to Hannah's question before I go to, I keep getting a lot of DMs directly. If you could send them in the full chat, that would be helpful. So Hilda can also kind of volley with me, but we're going to go to Hannah's question before I dive back into my DMs.
Thank you so much for hosting this workshop and just it's a very helpful resource. I'm a senior, and so I'm going to find jobs. And a lot of advice that I got over the summer from other Wellesley alums was that we're supposed to give business cards as well. So I'm wondering, but also they were a lot older. So I'm wondering, since we're already giving a resume, do you think that it would also be a good idea to start working on on creating a physical digital, like a physical business card rather than like a digital one, or kind of what's your opinion on that?
Do you want me to answer, Alexis? Or you
Yeah,
want?
go for it.
I was going to tell you. So you know how I said that there's a QR code at each employer's table? That will have a lot of your information. So sometimes as a recruiter, you might get a resume and then on the side you might make some notes. Just like when, you get the business card, they make notes on the side of your resume. So they'll get they'll get you on a digital sort of book, but that you've attended. But then if you give them the resume, that should be enough. And it's true. Once upon a time, we used to use business cards, but it doesn't seem to be as big of a thing anymore.
Yeah, there is
Thank you so
also a way if you have a LinkedIn page to like pull up a QR code and be able to very easily direct that person to connect with you on LinkedIn if, again, the conversation is moving in that direction. And you can always say like, I would love to stay connected. Um, so rewinding, sorry, back to my DMs.
Mhm.
I have a DM that talks about like not having much experience, but wanting to have like a more general approach to reaching out to employers, as opposed to like reaching out about a specific job or opportunity. Again, I would say that that's going to be dependent on the industry that you're applying for and what companies of interest that you have. That research, I cannot emphasize enough that the research component of this presentation is, maybe we didn't emphasize it as strongly as we should have, but it is the crux of what is going to help you develop strong questions to ask employers that are more general. So for example, if you go on an employer's website and they talk about, we are so proud of our initiatives in blah, blah, and blah. And you want to learn more about what those initiatives are and how they do those things for the greater community, ask them about that. That would be a wonderful question that has nothing to do with a job or an opportunity that they have available. There's also no expectation that you're walking up to an employer and saying, like, I have all of these amazing experiences in these industries. The expectation is that you're going up and telling them what experience that you do have. So don't negate the skills that you've maybe developed throughout your undergraduate career that have nothing to do with, you know, the technical skills that maybe a company might be looking for. So for example, when I graduated, I hadn't done a single internship. I had one research experience, but I had been a part of so many clubs and organizations, and I had a campus job for 4 years, 3 years as an RA. And I'd worked on the farm a little bit as well too. But so when I reached out to employers and companies, I talked about my wild ability to time manage, and my ability to connect and engage with people really well because I had been an RA with like a lot of event planning experience and a lot of mentorship experience with students. Um, and that was really what I talked about in my elevator pitch, as opposed to like all of the specific technical things that I had done because, you know, I hadn't had specific internship experience. So that also applies to the other DM'd question that I have about like first years approaching preparing for the fair, is that research component could not be more important. So absolutely make sure that you're going and learning about these companies and ask them questions that are relevant to them, as well as, again, that networking resource. The QR code that Hilda dropped in the chat is super helpful for understanding more about, like, just getting some more examples of like broad career questions that you might ask that have nothing to do, again, with your skill set.
Yeah. There's another question that actually was brought up via DM, but I've also gotten it plenty over the last couple of days. So I am going to put it out there. The question around, is it okay for first, it says, as a first year, is it okay that my resume is about what I did in high school? And I think it's 100% okay. We continue to have high school stuff on our resume pretty much for about, until we become an upperclassman. And it's a morphine, right? Like it takes a little bit of time as you gain experiences, you take things off. And it is sort of like it takes a little while. So yes, keep it as is. Do not worry. I think people will appreciate that you're a first year and that you did what you did in high school and that's how you got here. So I'm sure there's pretty amazing stuff on your resume to begin with.
And there's only so much you could have done here in the last 2 weeks. So they're
Yes.
not expecting you to be a wizard already at campus engagement. Really good questions, though.
Yeah,
Like, no
seriously.
such thing as a stupid question. There's just a lot of overlap across them. So I wanted to kind of make more of a blanket statement.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that QR code will take you to a bunch of good information. When you look at the companies, sometimes, just understanding like, what do they do? And you might have a question or two, just jot them down. Whatever natural questions you have, they will so embrace and be able to chat with you about. And sometimes it's about like oh, just scroll up in the chat. Somebody's asking me about the QR code. Just scroll up in the chat and you'll see it. Sometimes it's a matter of like, you might be really interested in a particular area of the work that they do. Ask them about that. Or if there's an alum there who just, she's part of the recruiting team, you could also ask her like, oh, how's it going? What kind of projects are you working on? What made you want to go to this company? Or,
Which class do you think most closely applies to your current job?
yeah. So you'll see too, like from each other, you'll start to learn like how people are asking questions. And sometimes that's the best way to learn, right? Is on the spot too.
Yeah. You could also Google companies as well.
Mhm.
Because, for example, I can't remember the name of the CEO, but that was caught at that Coldplay concert. But
Oh dear.
If the marketing team from that company were at the fair and you didn't know about this big event that had happened, that would be insane to not know. I do get one more DM'd question about like, are there career/internship opportunities for first years? I'm not going to say 100% no, but the recruiters will prioritize upperclassmen for sure in terms of opportunities that are going to be available. It doesn't mean that it's a bad idea to go. However, if you have a class that again overlaps the whole thing, this would be a scenario in which you're like, okay, maybe I go next year, or maybe I attend one of these other fairs instead. Because it might not directly lead to an opportunity. But if you're free and you're a first year student, absolutely take advantage of the opportunity to go and connect with employers early. And we have a lot of returners that keep coming back to the fair. So it could be really wonderful to like establish a connection this year, follow up on it next year. That could lead to a future internship or an opportunity. So a lot of fantastic questions in the chat.
I'm super impressed.
Any other questions?
Did we get to everyone's questions, PS? I think we tried to
Yes.
stay on top of it,
I
but
do have one more. Amazing. I don't have a resume. Where would I start to create one? Really lovely question.
Mhm.
Again, Hilda, if you could pull up the resume resource page from the career education website and drop that in the chat. We do have a resume resource page. It has a sample resumes, and we have them both in PDF version for visual effect and also in Google Doc version, which you can copy and make a copy of those resume drafts. Sometimes there are like other places where they have like resume templates. Some of them get way too fancy with it though. The career education ones that we've picked, we've made copyable because they're all boring documents which are typically very friendly for the software that companies use to filter through applications. So it could be nice to start with a boring document and then get a little bit fancier later, maybe if your industry so chooses to. There's very few industries that will, you know, love a very fancy decorative. But if you're like in the arts or something like that, there may be opportunity for that there. But I would definitely say that the career education website is where you would start with your resume. And you can make a copy of one of those and add in your information. And then you could book an appointment with us to talk more about it, or come by one of our many drop-in hours, which if you go on the career education website and look for drop-ins, you can also find those as well. Uh, I have another direct message about introducing yourself as a first year to recruiters while leaving a good first impression. That's a good question. I would say that you would introduce yourself very similarly to how upperclassmen would introduce themselves. You might not talk about specific experiences that you've had on campus or whatnot, but tell them why you're interested in talking to them. Why did you decide to walk over there? So again, that research component becomes really helpful there again, because if you don't have a good reason why you want to talk to them, that's going to make that introduction a little bit trickier. But I would say to go and do some research about the companies, look at what opportunities they have available. Something is drawing you to that company for a reason. Tell them about it. That's a really great way to start. But while you're also introducing yourself, you can tell them a little bit about your academic interests, your career interests so far. So that would also be a really great way to introduce yourself to recruiters. Someone else also asked, should we be expected to be asked questions based on our past experience on our resume or general knowledge in the field? I can't emphasize enough that this is not an interview. This is a career fair. So it's very unlikely that they're going to be asking you a lot of like this is not a quiz, where they're asking you deep questions about what you know and what you've learned and things like that. Um, I would say though that you should be able to speak to your past experiences on your resume. For example, this is a very silly one, but I went to a career fair once and I left a copy of my resume with one of the recruiters, and he noticed two things about my resume. First of all, that I had minored in dance, which I was a pre-veterinary major, so they were a little confused by that. And so he asked me, he said, "Oh, I noticed that you're minoring in dance. Why?" And I told him that I knew that I loved dancing and that as a pre-vet major, that I had a very rigorous course schedule. I knew I wouldn't make time to take dance classes unless it was a requirement. So I declared the minor. And he said he really loved that because his daughters were engineers and they really have other artistic interests, and he didn't want them to lose that as they're pursuing these engineering degrees, and wanted to encourage them to kind of balance their arts with their science as well too. And then he also noticed that I spoke Spanish. So don't lie about things on your resume, because I do speak Spanish, but I'm not fluent. And I never said that I was fluent, but he asked me to speak some Spanish to his colleague that he had brought with him. That was a very odd question. I just said, "Hello, how are you? I'm very excited about this company," and left it at that. So, so they may ask you some questions about things on your resume, but he didn't ask me to remember organic chemistry formulas or anything like that. It was very like surface level questions, but they might ask you a question like, "Oh, I saw you intern here," or "I saw you did this kind of research. Tell me more about that." And be prepared to kind of speak to more about your experiences and what you liked and didn't like about them, what they taught you.
Lucy, do you think you can mute yourself? You might have to do it, Alexis, because I can't do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna check if I can.
I'll add to what Alexis was saying. Usually the questions are coming from a very good place. They're super curious about a really fun thing that you have on your resume, or, a hobby that you have or something. It's usually from like, "Oh my gosh, you do that too." So, as far as like, they're not going to ask you to like recite, what you plan to do for your thesis. Not kind of like that kind. It's usually from a really fun place.
Especially if it's an alum too. They might be like, "Oh, you're working in Dr. So-and-so's lab? I worked there as an undergrad. Tell me more about blah 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 thing or blah blah quirky stuff." So don't expect the questions to be like they're grilling you. And if you do feel grilled, then, take that in stride. That should be a part of
Yeah.
your reflection. Because do you want to maybe, carry on at some place where you feel really pressured? Really good questions. Again, any more, feel free to drop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. Amazing. We're having some fall off. I'll go ahead and I think stop sharing here. If there are any other questions, feel free to hang around and ask. We have another 15 minutes or 16 minutes, I guess, on the clock. Um, so feel free to stick around and ask. But if you don't have any other questions, feel free to pop off if you'd like. Thank you so much for coming today.
And we'll see you at the fair.
And see you at the fair.
Mm. You're welcome.
Amazing. That was lovely. I'm gonna stop the recording too.
I think, oh, I thought you had, sorry.
No, I forgot.